Sure, and that's a great analogy using the car. The car can decelerate. The acceleration doesn't almost even matter because you're crashing, or in the case of the athlete, you're hurting yourself.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Great analogy. So this is interesting because a lot of the athletes I work with are like that 7 to 16 range, so they are still in that window where they can really benefit from some of this. So just like at a high level, if you're going to take 2 or 3 things for the young athlete, what should they work on to improve their mechanics?
Sure. I think that, when we separate mechanics, I think for again, we're talking about, sprint mechanics and deceleration mechanics. I think with the sprint mechanics, we try to be very basic because, again, for example, especially at the Division III level, we're really not allowed to, it would be an NCAA violation for me to work with athletes in their off season. They'd have to be either in season or in their non-traditional season, like fall ball for a baseball player, spring ball for a football player. Of course, during that time, their main goal and objective would be, obviously, their main skill set should be obviously practice and their specific skills for their sport. They're really doing, their specific preparatory training, and the other part would be strength. So really the speed portion is limited in that time of the year. So most of our athletes take a class in order to make an NCAA legal, and they're able to work on speed mechanics. But really, that only leaves us with a 7-week window. And in 7 weeks, and again, I at other schools, obviously, Division I, Division II schools, that window is going to be a little bit larger, obviously. But really, it's still pretty limited. So what we try to do is we talk about, with mechanics, we talk about the PAL, acronym, and PB and posture. And again, we want to make sure that athlete's leaning forward. Arm action being, again, we teach our athletes to have about a 90-degree angle, and that's going to extend with the backside, but, really trying to go cheek to cheek. And we have a lot of athletes that run and they bend at the elbow, and we try to get them to move through the shoulder and really try to emphasize pushing those elbows back. And again, that's really the thing that we try to really simplify. The problem is a lot of times with our athletes that are training on the field, if they're non-track athletes, a lot of them will have, if they're a lacrosse player, they're going to have a stick in their hand, and, so that's going to inhibit mechanics, overall, with the arm action. And then obviously the last one is going to be leg action, and we split that up into 2. We split that up into front side mechanics and back side, and really what we're looking for on the front side mechanics is a triple flexion. Flexion at the hip, the knee, and the ankle joint. So that basically that heel is almost aligned with the opposite knee. I think sometimes too much when you have that high knee, if you have that hip extended but the knee's not, all of a sudden your shin angle is going to be pointing forward, and then when you do land, it's going to really slow you down instead of being able to accelerate. And the backside mechanics being triple extension, obviously with the hip, the knee, and the ankle. And just emphasizing, obviously, pushing off the ground with every step. And really, when you're coaching mechanics, really you coach stride frequency. So you coach moving those arms as fast as possible. The faster your arms move, the faster the legs should be able to cycle through. The problem is you coach as much, speed, mechanics as you can, or basically stride frequency as you can, but that's going to be the least amount of improvement. And the other analogy being the most improvement they're going to make is going to be stride length, but you try to coach that the least because, like I said before, a lot of times if you're coaching taking bigger strides, that's going to inhibit their running mechanics overall. So that's really an issue as well. And then really what we try to, obviously emphasize is that, the closer you are to the start, the first couple steps, being more ground contact time, the shin angle is going to be more acute, so you're pushing basically more horizontally than vertically, or linearly than vertically, and really those stride lengths are going to be a little bit less. And as you get through your sprint, whether it being, anywhere between, whatever distance you're going to be running, obviously that ground contact time gets less, the shin angle is more vertical, the body position is more upright, it's not, basically almost a 45 like with the start. So again, that's one thing that the athletes probably need to understand. And as far as, as far as the the change of direction mechanics, or what we call deceleration training. Martin Rooney for the Parisi School had a really good video on this, and we use a lot of their stuff. We basically just just simplify it a little more. But we really teach when an athlete stops and plants, if they can, to stop and plant and take some of that force and land with their inside foot, so they can plant off their outside. Again, too many times when an athlete's running to their left, they're going to have to, and if they have to change back direction to the right, they plant off the left foot, and all that weight is on that left foot. Well, anytime you're running full speed, obviously that can be anywhere between 2 and 8 times your body weight. Not too many athletes are going to be strong enough to be able to stop all that momentum and be able to push off the opposite direction in a really short amount of time. They'll have to compensate one way or another, or they're going to lose, that change of direction time. So what we try to do is emphasize, again, almost like a jump stop in basketball, but slow themselves down with that inside foot so they can plant off the outside foot. And again, obviously body angle. I mean, the lower they are, the more they can lean toward the direction they're trying to go, and the more they're going to be, the more the weight's back toward their heels and not over their knees as much, the more efficiently they're going to change direction. And again, I think you want to make it so it's kind of natural. I don't think that, if they're thinking about how they're changing direction in the middle of a game, I think obviously that's going to slow them down. So you want to make it to the point where it's a natural progression. It takes reps and reps and reps, and you need to coach it every time they do change direction.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's why it's so important to build that skill. And your athlete said between 7 and 13, so they already have it at that college level.
Exactly.
So Mark, earlier you mentioned exercise technique. Now, do you find that a lot of the techniques are wrong, or were they just never coached in the first place?
I think a little bit of both, and I don't think like I said, I think if most times, if and again, and it's hard for me to be critical of high school coaches, but sometimes that if you have a coach that a lot of times when you have a strength coach, I mean, some of these schools have an actual strength coach that's certified, and some of them have they've contracted out, but sometimes it's just the coach in the weight room is a teacher that's getting a stipend. He's usually an assistant coach at another sport, and he just opened a weight room. And a lot of times that sometimes there's if you have an athlete performing an exercise wrong, it's either because they just don't know how to do it, or they just physically can't get in the proper position because of muscular imbalances, or just lack of strength in certain muscle groups. So again, I think quality of instruction has to be high enough so that those athletes can obviously identify the problem issues and be able to address them. For the most part, I don't know if a lot of athletes are. What we've seen is that a lot of athletes, we go the whole spectrum. Some have been, some have weight trained, but they're not maybe proficient at some of the technical lifts like the Olympic lifts or some of the structural lifts like a squat or a deadlift. We have some that are very proficient all because of they've been allotted the time to do that, or they've worked with someone, like yourself, and they're more prepared. And then some have just, they've never done anything. Because either they were a good enough athlete that they didn't have to, they didn't have to do that. And one thing that, I talked to, a lot of people have said this, Joe Ken has said this, and a lot of people about, the number one factor for an athlete to be good at their sport is their ability to play the sport. And I think that that's one thing. And so you have a lot of athletes that, and we see it a lot with lacrosse players, and they've been good enough to get away because their skill set was very high. But once they get to the college level, even at our level, and again, we've been fortunate enough to be, ranked nationally at Division III, you have the same athlete with the same skill set, but all of a sudden, that athlete is, 20 pounds heavier and just as fast and a lot stronger. And so I think that's something that, our athletes have to identify and really, that's a big eye-opener for them. But I think really that the problem with technique is, again, they've I think it's a combination of both. And I think so. So what we do is that we try to, again, start from scratch. Any athlete that we get, we go through a progression with them to teach them the proper technique, or at least what, the way we teach it. And we go through the basic lift. So when we teach it, we just basically teach a squat, an overhead, and some kind of Olympic lift. And we hope that those progressions have a carryover effect. We teach a clean progression that's going to have a carryover effect to the snatch, to a med ball throw, a kettlebell swing, any kind of even plyometrics in general. So we try to make those pretty broad and general, but at least they understand what a power position is, what a proper squat stance is, and how to execute those movements. So I think that it's a combination of both, but either way, I don't know what's harder is teaching it from scratch or reteaching it. We definitely have some sports are more apt to, have success in a weight room because of, especially, throwers, even if they never lifted, they've always, track and field throwers usually always have a pretty good idea of how to incorporate their hips. And I think that, within the movement, I think that really helps. So some athletes are going to be, the learning curve is going to be steeper than others, but that's where we start. So it's a little bit of both.
Yes, that's an interesting point. A lot of the parents will ask me, is with regards to weight training.
Sure.
I know the research has changed on this over the years, but what is a safe age to begin weight training, or should I say a very supervised weight training program, even if it's just very lightweight?
Sure. I think that that's one of the things that I think that people, I mean, there hasn't been much to say that, of course there was, the some of the studies have been, and some were obviously were discredited and just, about, people are concerned with growth plates and everything else. And I don't know if there's a set age. I think that, when you look at, if you look at a 13-year-old, you can compare two 13-year-olds, and one's training age or one's, their chronological age could be 13, 13 in a month or 13 in 2 months, however you want to classify it. But their biological age might not be the same, and their training age is not the same. And that's one thing that the NSCA has really, especially with training young athletes, is that you have, and again with youth sports, with AAU sports and everything else, and they have these and under if they're under 15, they lump everybody together. But you and I both know that 15-year-olds are not all the same, and I think the general guidelines are, I think if it's supervised by someone that's qualified, that's someone that's, and however you do the qualification, someone with a degree, someone that's certified, whatever, I think that the weight training can be incorporated a lot earlier than people may think. And I don't know if there's going to be a lot of negatives to a structured weight training program that is highly supervised. With that being said, though, I think that, anybody that asks me, I think that obviously any young athlete should probably incorporate body weight exercises before anything else. You have the athletes that want to perform a bench press, but they can't do a proper push-up. And that's one thing that I think that you run into. I think any kind of body weight exercise is going to be more beneficial, especially beginning. Once they've mastered, I think it's got to be a progression like anything else. And once they've mastered, you would never have a freshman, just start on do the same thing as a senior in high school. And I think it's the same thing with our athletes here. It's just you're looking at 17, 18-year-old men and or boys and girls, and then all of a sudden at the end of their career, they're 21, 22-year-old men and women. And I think that has to be said. And especially that's more dramatic in the young age. And I think after those, it's the same thing with plyometrics. I think after they can master their body, everybody says that, you can't incorporate plyometrics unless you can, squat twice your body weight. Well, that means no one can really do plyometrics except for a few elite, athletes. I think there's benefits. I think that, obviously coaching an athlete how to land correctly first is really going to be the most beneficial thing you can do. But I think after the bodyweight stuff, you can incorporate med balls, I think, are an excellent tool, or anything that, that obviously is going to be not as much of a axial load on the spine at first, and again, eventually get them into, barbell and dumbbell type exercises. I think that, that's a tough question to answer because, I don't think there is a one set answer. I just think if you have a young boy or girl that obviously, can't even hold a push-up position, without even going up or down, the last thing you want to do is have them on a bench press, so that's really, I think, that one of the, the guidelines, and I know that's very general and not real specific, but that's probably the best answer I would probably be able to give, is that it's going to be different for everybody, and they need to have a progression from body weight to probably medicine ball type activities, stability ball type activities, and then get into any kind of free weight activities once you feel that they've mastered that, and it all comes back to having the proper supervision to do that.